Less than half an hour after the final whistle, as the echoes of a lopsided playoff loss still hung over Acrisure Stadium, Aaron Rodgers sat at the podium facing questions that felt heavier than any pass rush he had faced all night. The Pittsburgh Steelers season was over, dismantled 30-6 by a relentless Houston Texans defense, and with it came the unmistakable sense that something much larger might also have reached its end. For Rodgers, this was not just another playoff loss. It felt like a crossroads, one shaped by time, history, and the brutal honesty that the NFL always delivers in January. Rodgers has lived long enough in this league to understand how final moments arrive quietly. There are no announcements, no ceremonies, no guarantees that a player gets to choose the perfect ending. Sometimes the end comes as a strip sack. Sometimes it comes as a pick six thrown while desperately trying to make anything happen in a game that has already slipped away. On Monday night, it came as both. The Steelers entered the playoffs with familiar hope and familiar doubt. Mike Tomlin's teams have made a habit of hovering just above the line between relevance and contention, good enough to get in, rarely dangerous enough to go deep. The addition of Rodgers brought intrigue, credibility, and the belief that experience alone could bend the postseason in Pittsburgh's favor. But this version of Rodgers was no longer the MVP force who once dictated games with ease. At 42, he was battling through pain, limitations, and a shrinking margin for error. Houston exposed all of it. From the opening drive, the Texans made it clear that Rodgers would not be allowed to settle into rhythm. Pressure came early and often. Defensive linemen collapsed pockets before routes could develop. Passing lanes vanished. Every throw felt contested. Every decision rushed. The Steelers' offense never found balance, never found tempo, and never found the end zone. Statistically, the night was ugly. Rodgers completed 17 of 33 passes for 146 yards with no touchdowns, one interception, and a lost fumble. His passer rating ranked among the worst performances of his storied career. But numbers alone fail to capture the weight of the moment. This was a quarterback who has started nearly 300 NFL games, who has rewritten record books, who has lived on the razor's edge of brilliance for 2 decades. And now, he was watching defenders run past him with the football in their hands, headed for the end zone, while the crowd groaned in disbelief. The turning point came early in the fourth quarter. With the Steelers already trailing and facing increasingly one-dimensional passing situations, Texans defenders Will Anderson Jr. and Sheldon Rankins broke through protection and buried Rodgers. The ball came loose. Rankins scooped it up and rumbled 33 yards for a touchdown. In a game defined by defense and field position, it felt decisive. Pittsburgh did not have the offensive firepower to answer. Minutes later, desperation set in. Down 18, Rodgers took another chance, firing a pass toward the middle of the field. Texans safety Callan Bullock read it perfectly, stepped in front of the route, and intercepted what may end up being the final pass of Rodgers' NFL career. Rodgers chased him briefly, instinctively, as quarterbacks do, before being ushered aside as the return continued. It was a small, almost symbolic image. A future Hall of Famer running after a younger defender, knowing the play, and perhaps much more, was already gone. As the clock wound down, Rodgers stood on the sideline in a gray beanie, helmet off, watching backup Mason Rudolph take the final snaps. There was no visible anger, no dramatic display of emotion, just stillness. Afterward, he exchanged handshakes, shared brief words with Texans players and coaches, and walked into the tunnel without looking back at the stands. The night ended not with fireworks, but with quiet inevitability. When Rodgers spoke to reporters, his words reflected both perspective and restraint. He refused to frame the loss or his future through emotion. He spoke about gratitude, about enjoying the season despite adversity, about the importance of stepping away and having the right conversations before deciding what comes next. It was the voice of someone who understands that decisions made in the immediate aftermath of defeat rarely lead to clarity, yet speculation followed him anyway. Broadcasters openly wondered whether they had just witnessed his final game. Teammates spoke with the careful tone reserved for moments when endings feel close. The question wasn't whether Rodgers belongs in the Hall of Fame. That has been settled for years, but whether his career timeline had quietly reached its final chapter. For Pittsburgh, the loss reignited deeper questions. Tomlin's playoff drought has now stretched uncomfortably long. His team's often competitive, but rarely dangerous when it matters most. Fans have grown restless, booing the offense even in moments of narrow leads, frustrated by stagnation and unmet expectations. Rodgers was supposed to be the antidote, the experienced closer who could tilt close games in January. Instead, his arrival may be remembered as a brief, intriguing experiment that ended the same way so many recent Steelers seasons have ended, abruptly and without celebration. Still, to reduce Rodgers' career to its final snap would be a mistake. He leaves behind one of the most efficient resumes the league has ever seen. Over 66,000 passing yards, more than 500 touchdowns, a career passer rating above 100, the lowest interception percentage in NFL history, 4 MVP awards, a Super Bowl title. He played in an era defined by quarterback excellence and still managed to stand apart. What makes this ending feel different is not failure, but humanity. Rodgers did not leave the game because he could no longer play at all. He leaves, or may leave, because the game no longer bends the way it once did. Defenses are faster, windows are tighter, bodies recover more slowly. Even legends must eventually confront those truths. If Monday night was the end, it was not the ending Rodgers would have scripted. There was no last-second drive, no signature throw, no curtain call, but there was honesty. There was resilience. And there was a final season in which he led a new team, won a division, stayed mostly healthy, and rediscovered joy in a city that embraced him fully. In the NFL, endings rarely arrive cleanly. They arrive in cold weather, under pressure, with defenders closing in, and seasons slipping away. Aaron Rodgers knows that better than anyone now. Whether he returns for one more run or quietly steps away, his legacy is secure. The only remaining question is whether Monday night was simply another chapter or the final sentence in one of football's greatest careers. Less than half an hour after the final whistle, as the echoes of a lopsided playoff loss still hung over Acrisure Stadium, Aaron Rodgers sat at the podium facing questions that felt heavier than any pass rush he had faced all night. The Pittsburgh Steelers season was over, dismantled 30-6 by a relentless Houston Texans defense. And with it came the unmistakable sense that something much larger might also have reached its end. For Rodgers, this was not just another playoff loss. It felt like a crossroads, one shaped by time, history, and the brutal honesty that the NFL always delivers in January. Rodgers has lived long enough in this league to understand how final moments arrive quietly. There are no announcements, no ceremonies, no guarantees that a player gets to choose the perfect ending. Sometimes the end comes as a strip sack. Sometimes it comes as a pick six thrown while